The following talk was given at the Southern Consortium of Classical Educators in June of 2022. The Consortium of Classical Educators provides resources and regional connections for Christian families, teachers, and educational organizations to expand the reach of classical education and foster human flourishing for generations to come.
I'm going to actually start, before I just start, with a quick little housekeeping, a couple of housekeeping things. Like all good students, I'm sure you have your pencils and your paper ready to take notes. I'm not going to be able to be here for the after Q&A panel at 4 for you to take off as soon as it's over. So I welcome any questions that you have for me, and you are definitely free to email me. And my email address is very simple. It's just my name, Renee Mathis, that's in your program, at comcast.net, comcast.net. So if you need to talk to me, I'm here. Also, I'm going to be talking about, and some of my information comes from the SCOCE Guide to Reading. I work with the SCOCE Institute. And through a couple of different little things that happen, we don't have a table here today with any of our books on them. So SCOCE Guide to Reading is just one of the things that SCOCE offers. And if you would like to place an order of any of the SCOCE products after today, I have a contact person for you at SCOCE. You just need to send him an email or call, and he will give you free shipping on your order. So, I'm sorry we don't have a table to show products to you, but just send me an email and I'll put you in touch with the person that can give you some free shipping. So, all right, there we go. Well, being the first one to speak after lunch is a challenge. I hope you have some of that coffee over there, and we will make a deal. You do your best to stay awake, and I will do my best to make it worth your while. Now, I look out over this wonderful group of people here today, and many of you are dear friends, and I know that you have varying reasons for being here. Some of you are homeschooling, and you're looking for encouragement and tools. Others of you are leaders in your church, in your co-op, in your school. Most everyone here is a teacher in some capacity, different locations. And some of you, well, I know for a fact at least one of you is here because he's a supportive husband. You're not the only supportive husband here, you're mine. No matter your reason for being here, I firmly believe that what I'm about to share truly does have value for each one of you. This talk really does have something for everyone. Even if you're thinking, but I don't teach reading, and I don't teach literature, I don't even teach Latin, I don't even speak Latin. If you're thinking, but I teach math, but as you already know, for Christian, math and reading can go quite well together. And I'm very thankful for those math teachers, because I am not a math person. No, but if you are a follower of Christ, you are called to be a student of His Word. And what I'm about to share can help you understand your Bible better, as well as understanding homework better. One of my favorite memories growing up was living within walking distance of a library. I was 8 years old, and we lived in Metairie, back in the day when you could send your 8-year-old like herself to watch the library. And I would bring home as many books as I could carry. But even before that, my life as a reader started pretty early. I was the oldest child in my family. My aunt was a first grade teacher, and so she gave my mom all her phonics materials. And I was probably about 4 years old in a whole new world of Dick and Jane and Spot and Sally and Puff. They were my best friends. I never looked back. Reading was not complicated. You just open the book and you go. But now, here I was years later, and I found myself in the position of teaching reading. Now, while homeschooling my own 5 children, I took on the position of junior high reading teacher at our tutorial. The class was literally called Junior High Reading and Writing, and soon to be followed by me being the high school literature and writing teacher. And so I had to figure out what to do. And I was convinced that the secret to being a good reading teacher was it in finding the right books? Oh no, I had lots of books. I had way more books than I could use. Was it in finding the right teaching skills? How to assign homework, how to grade tests, No? Oh, I had more confidence than I probably should have. But I was convinced that my quest centered on finding the right comprehension questions. If I could just find the best questions, we would have the best discussions and all my problems would be solved. Except, my friends, that is a hard quest. Because comprehension questions are expensive. I spent way more money than I should have on guides and books to this book or that literature. And I bought new ones, I bought used ones, I bought them online and downloaded them. And yeah, I wish I could have some of that money back. Some comprehension questions are just ridiculous. You read them and you think, I cannot believe I paid money for them. Some comprehension questions are not even pertinent. They don't really even apply to me or my students or where we are or what we're doing. Some comprehension questions are way too detailed. I would read them and think this level of busy work is going to kill any love that this child would have for this book. And then some comprehension questions are too general to the fact that, again, I paid money for this and it's not helping. And I thought if only there was a way that I could lead a discussion, enjoy the literature, and not be a slave to someone else's list of questions. Wouldn't that simplify matters? Wouldn't that make my life easier? Yes, it would. And yes, it did. Now, the next thing I needed to find was a way to teach my students to interact with their reading material. I didn't want them to be a slave to someone else's questions any more than I was. I wanted them to be independent. I wanted them to be able to approach their reading with tools to help them comprehend. Well, not just comprehend, but understand and enjoy. And yes, this makes my life as a teacher easier as well. So today we're going to look at reading in 3 parts. We're going to look at highlighting for comprehension, reading with a purpose, and discussing to gain wisdom. Now these are all intertwined and they all combine to make you not just a better reader, but a better discussion leader and a better teacher. So let's have some fun with this. Now again, I don't have handouts, but I do encourage you to take notes if that helps you follow along and pay attention. You specifically want to listen to 5 colors that I'm going to talk about, as well as 5 important questions. That's all you need to know for now, the rest is strictly up to you. All right, highlighting for understanding, that's part 1. I want you to meet your new friends. These are 5 highlighters, blue, orange, green, yellow, and pink. They usually come in a set, it's lovely. I actually like the ones that come with the retractable lids, because that means you only have to keep track of 5 things, not 10 things. And if you can remember to retract the lid, they last longer. Are we going to talk about how to read a book? No, how to wreck a book. I can say that in jest, but yes, I really do want you to, I'm not kidding, mark in your books. First I'll tell you why, and then I will tell you how. Why? Because good readers ask questions while they are reading. Beginning readers don't know how to do this. And this is where the encouraging teacher comes in. You ask, what's going on here? Where's this taking place? Who's doing the action? Are there words we need to learn? How's the author getting the point across? Which part was your favorite? Have you ever had this experience? See, you read, you close the book, and you can't remember a single thing you read. Has that happened to you before? It's like, poof, it's gone. That's not only a waste of your time, but it's frustrating, because then it means you have to go back and reread everything when it's time to study a test or it's time to get ready for class. Let's not do this. Let's learn some simple questions that can unlock the treasures waiting beneath these 2 colors. Your highlighters help you keep track of these answers, because each color means something different. All right, next, good readers not only question the text, they interact with the text. In this digital age, how many times have we heard the word interactive used about the latest and greatest educational gizmo? But I want to challenge you, instead of thinking that interaction involves pixels or screens, think of it as an action between 2 parties. You, the reader, and the author. You, the reader, and the words on the page. The act of asking questions and marking a text involves movement and objects. A kinesthetic learner finds that reading is suddenly a hands-on experience. A visual learner learns that he can categorize the content by means of the color used to draw attention to words or sentences. An auditory learner is free to actually talk back to the book. If you're one of those people who read and say, I can't believe you just said that, you're probably an auditory learner. Everyone benefits by the ease of reviewing the material, which in turn reinforces the material for easier retention. You can actually go back, review what you've read by looking at the different colors and reminding yourself of what you've learned. You don't have to start from scratch. And also, you can't fall asleep if you're holding a handful of highlighters. All right, good readers own their work. This kind of participatory reading brings with it a level of ownership that is lacking in more, let's say, passive reading situations. The active reader does not say, here I am, I dare you to entertain me. Rather, he approaches the text with the intent of making it his own. Two students won't necessarily be captivated by the same brilliant sentence. Everybody brings their own background and knowledge to the reading, which will in turn inform your own questions and your own notes. When a book is read, it may well become a favorite, filled with markings and notes of favorite passages. For some, it might actually occupy a space on your shelf meant for reference material because you can actually go back to the book, open it up, and find those things that you loved or needed. It might be low. Start that book on a journey. Let other people mark in it. Who knows where it will end up? But the experience of truly understanding a book lasts forever. You don't just own a copy on your shelf. You own the work in here. It becomes a part of you. All right, and again, good readers mark in their books. Now, some of you may be a little concerned about the idea of permanently marking in a book. We have been trained by years of don't touch, don't bend, and this method seems a little unorthodox, makes us bristle a little bit. You know, we're going to take the repository of words and thoughts by those who have gone before us and mark on the page. Color on them. It seems like the height of sacrilege. And if you're a homeschool mom, I get it. We want to save money, and we want to pass down the books from one kid to the next. And the idea, I have to buy a new one every time. There are ways to find inexpensive words. Because think about this alternative here. Might the original author have wanted his or her audience to actively engage in learning from their carefully orchestrated thoughts? Does any writer pour his soul on the paper with the goal of having it rest on a dusty shelf? Likewise, think of a hammer or nails. They're tools that are meant to be used for a further purpose. Books are a tool to grow human beings. They are a step on the path. They're not the destination. Mortimer Adler says, quote, marking up a book is not an act of mutilation, but of love. So good readers know that there's a price to be paid. This destination will cost, not a fortune, but it will cost. It can be argued that this is not the most cost-effective way to read and learn, but you can buy inexpensive editions of classic works. You can find used editions. No painter begins with expensive oils and brushes, and likewise, you're not going to send your new reader out with, great-grandfather's leather-bound antique copy of something. So start small. Stop thinking of books as your temporary companion and begin to look at them as a lifelong friend. What a joy to graduate your child from your home or school and send them on their way into the world, armed with a collection of well-loved, well-read, well-used, and yes, marked up books. Now, highlighters are a tool. And if you are thinking of highlighters back to your college days when you had one color, yellow, and everything in the book was yellow, because you just bled yellow all over everything, I've got good news for you. There is a better way. We're going to do things a little differently. We're going to learn what the colors mean, and we're going to learn it because we read like this anyway. Now, we're actually going to have a little bit of an interactive session right here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read to you out of the Odyssey. The first 10 lines. And yes, my book is thoroughly marked up and colored in. And It's mine. It's wonderful. I'm going to read you the first 10 lines. Just listen and enjoy, and then I'm going to ask you a question. Tell me news of the man of many ways, who was driven far journeys after he had sacked Troy's sacred citadel. Many were they whose cities he saw, whose mind he learned of. Many the pains he suffered in his spirit on the wide sea, struggling for his own life and the homecoming of his companions. Even so, he could not save his companions, hard though he strove to. They were destroyed by their own wild recklessness. Fools who devoured the oxen of Helios, the sun god. And he took away the day of their homecoming. From some point here, goddess, daughter of Zeus, speak and begin our story. All right. What did you hear? Don't overthink it.
Somebody asked me to tell the story.
Okay. We're going to hear a story, and someone's going to tell it.
We're on a journey.
A journey. Okay.
Calling on the muse.
Say it.
Calling on the muse.
He's calling on the muse. Okay, Jesse?
We'll take the oxen.
The fools ate the oxen.
Mythology.
Did you hear some names of some characters? Helios, the sun god. Who are these first 10 lines about? Tell me news of the man of many ways. Do we know who that is? He's not named. Some man of many ways. So when we read, we naturally pick these things up, right? People, places. Did you hear a place mentioned? Troy? Some things happened. The fools ate the sun god. There was a journey. Someone's talking. A muse is going to tell us a story. All right, so what we can do with our highlighters is we can keep track of those things. And this is the key to the highlighters. These are the colors. First we have pink. Pink starts with P, like people and places. And we use pink to highlight the proper names, right? The main characters, right? The people and the places. Next, we want to know where we are, and that's green. Green helps us with the structure, and structure can mean a couple of different things. Structure can mean a place. So when I think of green grass and trees outside. That's where we are, the place, right? But green can also mean the structure in the sense of this person's talking, and they said a lot of stuff. Next, this person talked, and they said a lot of stuff. So sometimes you use green to mark, like you're reading the Iliad. Zeus said, and that might go on for 2 pages. And then you get, and Athena replied, and that might go on to 2 pages. So I would use my green to mark Zeus said, Athena replied, to help me find my place, know where I am. But I could also use green if, for example, the action changes from one scene to another. Think about being at a play, and you know how they might be in the living room and the curtain goes down, and there's a lot of activity behind the stage, behind the curtain, and the curtain comes up, and all of a sudden they're not in the living room anymore, they're in the backyard, right? That's what green can help you with. Things like, and then he went into the backyard. Again, it just helps you find your place. But because this is so useful, not just for fiction, but for nonfiction as well, you can use green to help you follow the structure of an argument. If you read an essay by someone who says, I'm going to make 3 points. First, right? You would highlight 3 points, and first, and then you go down a little farther, and you get the second, a little farther, and finally, helps you follow where the argument's going. And that can be helpful. So that's what green does for us. Yellow is for plot. What's happening? What's important? What happened next? And then what happened? And then what happened? So yellow helps us track the action of the story. That leaves us with two more. Orange. I like to use orange with my students for two things. Vocabulary words, because when we read and we find a word we don't know, it's a good idea to look it up. That's what makes good readers, right? Make it part of our vocabulary. Maybe when I was reading the Odyssey, you heard a word that you're not really familiar with. And I would have students who would go, Mrs. Mathis, I know all those words. And they probably did. But I would say, no, which is a word that you don't usually use in your everyday speaking and writing? Okay, I bet you can find it. Muse. What is a muse? Maybe we don't really know it. Look that one up. Right? What is a citadel? Troy's sacred citadel. No, I'm not sure I know what that means. So orange is great for vocabulary and also figure of speech. If you happen to be teaching similes that week, you can have your kids highlight the similes in orange. It's really fun if you're reading Homer because his similes go on for sometimes a page or more. Orange is great for figures of speech and vocabulary. And then that leaves us with blue. And blue's the fun one. Blue's the highlighter you're probably going to run out of first because there's so many people in places. But blue is just for your favorite part. What did you love? What did you read that made you go, oh, or what did you read that made you just like, it's so beautiful, I can't believe you wrote that. I just want to say it over and over. I want to copy it into my commonplace, but go to Lisa's talk later and find out about that. Blue is your favorite part. And there you go. This works with fiction, but it works with nonfiction. You can use it when you read your Bible. Right? Who are the people that's important in this story? Maybe you have a passage where, and God said, and you want to follow that train of thought. But it also works for history books, right? Does history have people and places? Oh yeah. Does history have events that cause other events that we need to keep track of? Yes, it does. Highlighting is great for that. What about science? Science is full of new vocabulary words. There's always new vocabulary words stored in science. And also things that cause other things to happen. So it works for science. Maybe you're reading an essay or an argument by someone, and you need to follow the flow and the structure of their argument. You can use your highlighting to do that. And again, maybe you're just reading a novel that makes you smile, or a piece of poetry that just warms your heart, and you get that blue highlighter out because you just love it. Now, some practical tips. With children, start slow and don't start too young, right? Beginning readers are just learning how to decode words and how to get fluent, and we're not going to burden them with 5 highlighters. But when they get a little older, maybe upper elementary, you can definitely start them off with just say one color. And maybe you only do pink for a while. Maybe you're just learning to spot the people that the book is about. But then, when they get fluent with pink, then you add in green or even yellow. So you can do a lot with this. But you might not want to do it with every single textbook that they're reading. Again, you can start slow. Now, with older kids, I would definitely hold them accountable. You know that phrase, inspect what you expect. If I'm asking them to highlight their books, I want to see their books. And yes, we would have, usually during a test day every few weeks, I would actually collect their books and I would flip through them to make sure they were actually highlighted. And they would, because really the reason for doing this is it helps them to be prepared to enter into the class discussion. Nobody wants to be left out, nobody wants to be unprepared, and they quickly learn that it's not that hard to do, and they come to class and they feel pretty confident about contributing to the discussion. So definitely hold them accountable when you ask them to do this. All right, and finally, I want to tell you quickly a story of 2 students when it comes to highlighting. And I think this just kind of, well, you'll get the point. I don't need to tell you what the point is. I had one student who was severely dyslexic. He was barely making their way through my class, even with the help of mom and a tutor, and an audio version of the book that they would listen to while they were reading the book at the same time. And here I was adding a highlighting requirement on top of that. And I did question, is this a good thing to do for this child? As it turned out, it was. Their mom came to me and said, highlighting saved their life. She said, this student's comprehension has risen by leaps and bounds. It forced them to interact with what they were reading. It forced them to keep track. It gave them a way to go back and review. This was the best thing this child ever learned how to do. And this was, I'm telling you, a struggling student. Then on the other end of the spectrum, I had another student who was, I would definitely call him gifted. I know we all think our kids are brilliant. This student was truly, truly gifted. He was very smart. So Mrs. Mathis, I don't need to highlight. I have photographic memory. I remember everything I read. Why do I have to do this? Matthew, because you're in my class and I'm asking you to. And I think it's good for you to learn how to do it. It's a good tool. Rumble, rumble, rumble. All right. But he did it. And then a year or so later, he came back to visit me over Christmas break. He was at Baylor University in the honors program, of course. He was brilliant. So Mrs. Mathis, I want to show you something. So look at this list of books that we were required to read our freshman year. And it was a long list of books. It was a thick list of, every classic book in the Western canon tradition, you name it. And he said, Mrs. Mathis, I have to tell you, highlighting saving life. He said, the only way I would have ever have been able to keep track and do all that reading and not get so totally overwhelmed and lost was because you taught me how to. Thank you for telling me that, Matthew. It works for everybody, it really does. So, we know we naturally ask questions while we read, and we should be asking questions while we read. But how do we read? Are there some things we could use, even as grown-up adults, to help us to get more out of our reading and to be more efficient? And I believe there is. So we're going to talk about reading with a purpose. Now, we're going to read in layers. Unless you are a complete extrovert like me, you probably don't walk up to a person in a new room and go, hi, I'm your new best friend, and we're going to spend a lot of time together, and I'm going to learn everything about you, and yeah, a little awkward. You probably don't read like that either. So the first thing we can do when we get a new book is to just sort of introduce ourselves slowly. It's like giving it a little handshake, right? Just take the book and get to know it. What does it look like? Are there pictures in it? No, no pictures. What else do I notice about this book? It has line numbers. That's weird. Nothing else that I read has line numbers. Okay. I also noticed that I go to the end because you can flip to the end. You're not breaking the rule. Or there's a whole list of Greek names and it tells who they are and which book they're in. Well, that's good to know. I might need that later. There's an introduction at the beginning. I notice at the top of each page, it kind of gives you a summary of these two pages. A capture of the old man of the sea. That's it. That took me about a minute, right? But I already have an idea and a sense of what this book is. We're not strangers anymore. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to pick a section to read, and it might be a chapter. It might just be something like this. First page of the chapter, second page, that's it. I'm going to pick that section, and I'm going to quickly scan it by going straight down the page. I'm just going to follow my finger, go down the page, go to the next page, follow my finger slowly down the page. What on earth can I learn by doing that? You would be surprised, right? You might see the same word pop up a few times, just because you can't help but see it. Again, it's very fast. You're not slowing down, you're not stopping, you're just quickly going down the page. You might notice that, there are only 2 paragraphs on the whole page. Okay? But the point is, you're preparing your brain to receive what you're going to read in more detail later. You're kind of almost setting up that filing cabinet that's going to start, your brain's going to start using. And it doesn't take you any work. Take your finger, and we're going to skim again, and this time we're going to do like an S pattern. So we're just going to do that. And I'm going to still follow my finger. It still only takes about 10, 15 seconds, maybe 20 or 30. That's it. And I have now, again, just sort of got to know the book a little better. Again, it's kind of like going back to our new friend example at a party. When you first meet someone, you don't know every single thing about them right away. But you do know a few distinguishing details. Maybe their height, or their hair color, or something about them you could recognize them when you saw them again. Okay? So next thing we do, we're gonna read it again, that same section. This time we're gonna use our pink highlighter. And we're going to go through, and we're just going to look at capital letters. We're going to mark the names of the places. That's pretty easy to do. You can find a capital letter. Highlight, 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 highlight. As you do this, as you learn to pay attention, again, it's a really low effort kind of an exercise, but you are going to start noticing things. Wow, the word Zeus is all over this page. I thought I was reading Odysseus, but this is all about Zeus. Okay, just tuck that fact away. We'll use it later. Next, we're going to take our green highlighter. We're going to go over the same section. I'm going to look for structure. I'm just looking for, again, things like Zeus said, Athena said, Zeus said. I would mark that in a book like this, especially helps you track. Maybe you're reading Moby Dick, and the whole thing is all about the description of a whale for 2 pages. Okay, there's not much to mark in green. It's talking about a whale. Okay, yeah, that's all we're doing. Looking for that skeleton. Maybe you're reading a nonfiction textbook, and the main thing you mark in green is Roman numeral 1, Roman numeral 2. This section has 2 subsections. Okay. Do I get to read yet? Do I get to read the book yet? Yes, we're working up to that. It's kind of like we're working up to getting a coffee with our new friend. You've gone from a big crowd to maybe the 2 of you are going to sit across the table from each other. Maybe I should have titled this talk Speed Dating with Books. But almost ready to turn you loose with this book. There's one more thing we're going to do. And teachers, this is where your job is really important. If you can, give your student a big question to think about while they read. If you're reading this on your own, give yourself a big question to think about. Why are you reading this? If you're reading a book of theology, and if it's a biography of Augustine, maybe you want to know what Augustine's conversion was like. Okay, I'm going to read this with a view to what was his conversion like. Maybe teachers, you're giving a student a book to read, and you want to give them a question that will help guide their reading. And in the beginning, it's okay as teachers that we give them the questions, because they're still learning. They're still learning how to ask good questions. As we grow and we mature, we learn to ask better questions. But we weren't created to learn. And when we hear a question, there's a little bit of discord, a little bit of disharmony, and we were created to want harmony. And what does our mind do? It seeks to achieve harmony by finding the answer to the question. So this idea of a central guiding question can cause us to attend to the whole book. Things like in the Odyssey, we can ask questions like, what is hospitality? Right? There's a lot of hospitality going on in this book, and there are echoes of it everywhere, and I want to see what that looks like. Maybe my question in the Odyssey is, what is a faithful wife? I love Penelope, she's great. Someone said this book should really be called The Song of Penelope. She's as much a part of it as Odysseus did. The guide to reading has some great questions in here. Again, they're general, but as you learn to apply them to what you read, they can be really helpful. Things like, who is God in this book? What does the author say about God? What does the author say about man? Where does evil come from? Was this a noble act? Was this a just act? So you can think of lots of good questions that go with any kind of book that you read, whether it's a fairy tale, the 2, great classic work of literature. They all have questions that we can use. Let's see, To Kill a Mockingbird, what is prejudice? Hamlet, how do I make decisions? Fahrenheit 451, what should feed our souls? What is the place of entertainment? Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, what does addiction look like? What causes man to sin against his neighbor? So those are things that kind of keep in the back of your mind, and as you read, you start looking for answers to that question. So we've quickly highlighted with our pink, and we've quickly highlighted with our green. So now we're going to sit down and just read and enjoy that passage. And we've got our yellow highlighter to mark what's important. What just happened in this section? Again, if you're reading Dickens and there's 2 pages of description of a road, okay. I get it. And I know what the road looks like. Not much happened in that section, probably. You don't need to use your highlighter. But if someone attacks this person and then they shoot back with a gun and then they fall in, dead, and blah, blah, blah. A lot of stuff is going on. You can mark it with your yellow. Go back and look with your orange. Did I learn any new words? Did I see something that I wanted to make note of, like a figure of speech? Or did I just have a favorite part? I use my blue. Asking questions while we read is important, and good readers will keep up that dialogue with what they're reading. They'll keep up that dialogue with the author, even if they don't realize it. Now, let's talk about part 3 of my talk here, discussing what we read. How are we going to do that? Well, the neat thing that I learned when I became a part of SCOCE and started using their writing curriculum and started teaching others how to use their writing curriculum is that writing is not scary when you break it down into its component parts of the process. And the first part of that process is what we call the invention section, the invention part. Not invention as in, oh, Alexander Graham Bell invented the telephone, but invention as related to inventory. Right? We want to teach our students to build up an inventory of things to write about. What am I going to say? Well, isn't it much easier if you have a whole shelf full of things to pick from? Of course it is. So where do we get those things to write about? How do we fill that shelf? We do that by asking good questions. And the questions that we use come from Aristotle, so we're classified now. And Aristotle had these things called his common topics. Topic from the Greek word topika means place you go. And these are places you go for information. So we're using 5 of them. There are a few more than that actually, but we're going to focus on 5 of these common topics. And if they're going to help us build an inventory and find things to write about, guess what? These same common topics can also help us become better readers and give us things to talk about. So, the good news about these writing questions is they're also thinking questions. And I love how I think what I'm saying builds perfectly what Scott shared earlier about Northeast Sayers and our need to teach our students how to use words well. And not only in their own writing and reading, writing and speaking, but in their reading. To learn how to use words to think about what they're reading. All right, we're going to dive into the story and think about questions. Now, I have a couple of things to say real quick about questions. Andrew Kern, who's the founder of the SCOCE Institute, is fond of saying that the quality of your life depends on the quality of the questions you ask. I always thought that was brilliant. I love that quote. Then I found out where I got it. And we mentioned this book a few times today too. If you're doing your classical conference bingo card, norms and nobility should be crossed off by now. This is David Hicks. This is the book every classical educator needs. And David Hicks says, quote, "Behind every educational program lie certain questions and assumptions. The quality of these and the imaginative deliberation with which they are put into practice determine the quality of the school." Now, if the quality of your education, the quality of your questions determines the quality of your school, it certainly does affect the quality of your life. Again, from Hicks, quote, "The best questions are not limited by what can be done, they ask what ought to be done." What ought to be done? What should be done? And this first best question that you can ask, this is not one of the 5 common topics, this is one of those guiding questions, is the should question. Any question can serve to guide us as we read, and this is one of the best ones. Take a character, pick something he did, and ask if he should have done it. It's that simple. It really is. Any character, should the little pig have built his house out of straw? Should this little pig have built his house out of wood? Should Cinderella have gone to the wall? Should Scout have crawled under the next door neighbor's fence? Any question. I cannot emphasize it enough. Any question will drive you deeper into the book as you seek to find the answer to that question. One time I had a student, and he was a little bit of he was a hot mess. He thought he could put one over on Mrs. Mathis, and when I told him to pick a character and a question to write an essay about, he said, okay, whether Sherlock Holmes should have packed his toothbrush. And believe it or not, that is something that Sherlock Holmes did in the short story, The Adventure of the Speckled Pig. He did pack his toothbrush. And it's like, sure, Scott, write your essay on that. And he was like, okay. No, I think he surprised himself. He wrote a really good essay. Because by asking whether Sherlock Holmes should have packed his toothbrush, you have to ask, why is he going there? Where is he going? Should he have gone there? What's the point? He had to think about the story in order to answer that question. And he came up with a great essay. So remember when I said we don't have to be bound by someone else's list of questions. You might think, but what if my student asks me a question and I don't know the answer to it? Here's Hicks again. This will help you take a deep breath. You're going to be okay. He said there are questions possessing a wisdom apart from the answers. Sometimes the question itself is what matters. It's the journey that it takes you on. We may never know the answer, and that's okay. Okay, so here come these 5 questions that I promised you earlier. The 5 common topics, and the first one is definition. What kind of a thing is it? What groups does it belong to? What are its parts? You might think, well, that doesn't sound like a dictionary definition. No, it doesn't. These are thinking questions. You don't need a dictionary to answer this question. You just need to think. Troy, what kind of a thing is it? It's a city. What groups does it belong to? Okay, ancient cities. Troy, Babylon, Athens. What are its parts? Well, I know there's a wall around it. That might be important. Okay? I'm thinking about Troy. And you ask your students, what do they want to contribute to this discussion? It's great. Definition. We can define people. Who is Odysseus? What are his parts? Well, he's smart. He's a great rhetorician. He can use his words. He's sly. He's the man of many ways. He inflicts pain on other people. And he also pain is inflicted on him. Those are his parts. He's dad. He's a husband. He's a warrior. He's a defender. He's a king. I mean, let's just have a whole classroom discussion on what does it mean to be a man in ancient Greece and what kind of man was Odysseus. That's definition. But again, I don't want you to overthink this because you can use these questions with your 5 and 6-year-olds as well as your 10th and 11th and 12th graders. You can ask your little kids, let's look at our dog. What kind of a thing is a dog? What are his parts? He has a puppy tail. He has ears. Okay. All right, the next question is comparison. How is this like this thing? I'm sure you know what's coming next. How is it different than this thing? We can compare any 2 things. And again, this is a lot of fun to do with kids. I will have to tell you on the way up here today, Steve and I were listening to a podcast, and they were comparing the Milky Way bars to Snickers bars. These were grown-ups, by the way. Let your kids compare Honey Nut Cheerios to Cinnamon Toast Crunch. Have fun with it. It always gives you something to talk about on the road to Grandma's house, because you can pick any 2 things or any 2 characters and start comparing them. So we can compare Odysseus to Troy, we can compare Achilles to Agamemnon, we can compare Penelope to Calypso, any 2 things. You can compare your mother to Penelope. You can compare your little sister to, whatever. So comparison. And the next common topic we're going to look at is circumstances. Circumstances. What's going on here in this place right now? What's going on over there in that place? What about 100 miles away? What's going on over there? Again, it's just helping us collect and gather information. When we do this with our writing, I'm going to do a brief segue here. When we do this with our writing, we're not asking the kids to make any kind of decision or judgment at this point. They're just collecting information. And the same is true for our reading. I'm not asking the student to write an essay, to draw conclusions. I just want them to learn to see what's there, to what's in this book. Like how many of us have, I'm sure have been guilty of this as well. We have to read a Bible verse, we read a Bible story, and jump right to the conclusion in the application without stopping to learn what it actually says. So we're slowing down here. We're teaching the kids to read carefully, to think carefully. So we're going to talk about circumstances, okay? What was going on in Troy when there's one thing going on. Achilles is sitting on the beach and he's whining and crying, okay? What's going on back at Ithaca? The suitors are meeting Odysseus on the tops of home. What's going on over here in this camp? What's going on behind the city wall over here? Circumstances just let us look at the place and the setting. Now, if circumstance is all about what's going on at the same time here as here, our next common topic builds on that, and that's the common topic of relation. We're going to ask about a relationship between 2 things that happen. One thing happens first, and then another thing happens. So what's the relationship right away? One came first, one came next. Okay, that's a relationship. That's a time relationship, right? All right, did that first thing cause the second thing? That's a cause and effect relationship. Maybe yes, maybe no. If you've taught logic, you know one of the informal fallacies is post hoc ergo propter hoc. Just because it happened after this thing Doesn't mean it happened because of this thing. We want to look at that. So let's look at cause and effect. Okay. And then the last of the common topics is testimony. Testimony. If we were going to pretend to interview the characters in the story, what would we learn? What would Achilles say about Odysseus? What would Nestor say about Odysseus? What would Penelope say about Odysseus, right? They're character witnesses. But we also can learn from eyewitnesses. When Odysseus, in the end of the Odyssey, a spoiler alert, he kills a lot of people. If you were at that scene and you were to interview one of these eyewitnesses, what would they tell you happened? What kind of weapon did he use? What did he do first? So that's an eyewitness that you would interview or ask questions. Look at expert witnesses. Okay? If Odysseus uses a certain kind of Greek weapon, maybe you'd like to go research that Greek weapon and find out what it's like, what it's made of, what its capabilities are. That might tell you more about what happened when he went in and had this mass slaughter. So testimony is another way to gather information. Now, the neat thing about asking these questions, again, you can ask it of any book, you can use it with any age. It also helps your kids come prepared to talk about things when you have an in-class discussion. Why? Because here we go back to the highlighters again. These correspond beautifully with the 5 common topics. If you want to talk about definition, find out one of the pink things that they highlighted and let's define it. Right? Let's talk about its part. The people and the places go great with definition. If you want to talk about cause and effect and plot, yellow. What did they highlight in yellow? Let's talk about what caused that and what came after and what came before. If you want to talk about circumstances, what's going on over here and what's going on over here, we have the green that they've already highlighted. And then the best discussion part starter, just ask them what their favorite part was. That was one of my favorite parts of our classroom discussion, liturgy, because the kids always knew it was going to be the first question I asked, and it was how we started every discussion. What was your favorite part? And what was so fun was they all knew they were going to share, and so they all came prepared. And you could always have one kid who would say, she stole my favorite part. I was going to say that. And then you go to the third one, well, he stole my favorite. I was going to say that too. Yeah. And I was like, you know what, guys? The fact that 3 of you picked the same part as your favorite, what does that tell you? It's a beautifully written book, and you were able to spot a beautifully written sentence. Because it is a favorite part of a lot of people. That's okay. There's a reason this is a favorite book. There's a reason we all read it, because it's got so many good favorite parts. Now compliment them on that. So the next week, they're all determined to find something different for the other person. And it was great. But it was funny, because going back to the comprehension questions thing again, I still thought I had to, okay, I'm not going to pay them for their comprehension questions. I'll write my own, gosh darn it. And I would write this carefully curated list of questions that we were going to all talk about. By the time 18 students all shared their favorite part, we had gotten to every one of my comprehension question topics, because they pick out the good parts of the book, and by the time you talk about them, that's what you wanted them to get out of the chapter anyway. And so my prep work was like cut down to almost nothing, because I let them contribute, right? They were the ones engaged, and they were the ones doing the discovering. And I just got to sit there and watch the light bulbs go on. It was beautiful. More advantages for the teacher. You have options. You can choose which common topic to focus on, depending on maybe what you're studying in history or what you're studying in writing. You honor the students. Their contributions are valuable because they are bringing them to you. It's a gift that they're offering to you when they share something that they learned. You honor the subject, because I want the students to focus on the text and not their feelings about it. Right? Now I know favorite part is a little subjective, and I admit to using that to get them to want to talk, because everyone wants to talk about their favorite. But not every student will have a favorite every time, and that's okay too. I would just ask them to be able to share something of value. Like, okay, you didn't have a favorite. What was something that made you ask a question? Maybe what was something that stood out to you? So, it's okay. You have freedom and you have flexibility with this, but you also have some structure. Right? Sometimes you, the teacher, say, you know what, the rabbit trail is the point. We're going to go on that rabbit trail. Sometimes you have to say, I think we're going to guide this back. So I'm just going to pick, tell me about the yellow on this page and read me your favorite yellow, and let's talk about the plot. You just kind of guide it back to where you want it to go. One of my apprentices, who was a first year in the SCOCE apprenticeship, had this to say after participating in discussions like this. And a big hurdle for the apprentices, is, especially the first years, is what if I ever read these books and I don't want to sound stupid? Right? I just won't say anything in the discussion. Well, that's not the point. I want them to talk. And so we would do discussions just about, like I've told you here. And she said, my attitude towards talking and sharing changed because my words were valued. Sharing became a way to grow relationships. That's what we want as teachers. So to wrap up, we have talked about using highlighters as tools to read with a purpose, using layers and questions as tools to read interactively, and directing our thinking about the book as a way to get even more out of our reading. Now, many of us are here because we want to repair the ruins of our own education, or lack thereof. We want our children and our students to have what we did not. And one route for us to that repair is for us to begin to read and to read well. So to quote Hicks again, certainly not until teachers take delight in reading old books and show faith in their life-giving value will students enjoy studying the classics of their civilization. If we want our students to love the classics, it has to begin with us. And if it is to begin with us, we need to know how to read, and to know how to read, we have to ask questions, powerful questions. So what is classical education, and why does Louisiana need it? Louisiana needs us to be better educated, but even more, it needs us to be better friends and neighbors.